All right, Berlin.
Yes.
Berlin, where are you from originally?
I am from Irvine, California.
Orange County. Tell me about your family.
I have a great family. I grew up in a very small suburban neighborhood, upper middle class, great childhood, played sports, did everything. A perfect childhood. Couldn't have asked for anything.
What kind of teenager were you?
Troublesome. Got in trouble with the law when I was 15 years old.
Where do you think that came from, if you had such a perfect childhood?
I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm not sure. I'm kind of like the black sheep of my family. Around Thanksgiving, I'm always the one that's... There's always tension when I'm just the black sheep. Thanksgiving is always interesting because everybody's, I don't know, I don't know how to explain it. They're all yuppie, kind of uppity. My cousins are all, they're all pretty well established, and most of them have been to Ivy League schools, and I don't know.
You took a different path.
Yeah.
I
was the girl that walked in through the outdoor.
Where did your path lead?
It's led me to an interesting trail.
When were you done with school?
I finished school. It took me 7 years to get a bachelor's degree because I was put on academic probation for obviously partying and having too much fun. So I transferred to a boring school. I was done probably around 29, and then I married a guy to help him for his papers, a gentleman from Argentina, when I was 30.
So now we've jumped ahead to 30, but I'll bet you a lot of stuff happened in your 20s. Your 20s are probably colorful.
Yeah, they were very colorful. When I was in college, I went to college up in Northern California, and I got a job as a bartender it's based Hell's Angel Bar. And I started bartending there, and things got interesting. And I basically was kidnapped by a group of Hell's Angels. After that whole incident, I came back down to Southern California.
What was it like being kidnapped by Hell's Angels?
Pretty hairy. I don't remember a majority of what happened. There's bits and pieces that come to mind. I do remember there's like I said, it's very sparse to me. It's hard for me to remember, but I remember that
you were drugged?
I was drugged, yes. Yeah. I remember a gentleman walking up to me and asking me if he could buy me a drink, and I declined the drink. And he came up to me again, and I started to get annoyed because I said no. And on the third time, he got irritated with the rejection and said something nasty. All I remember is from that point, fast forward, I ended up, I was at this strange couple's house, and they were showing me pictures of their baby that they had lost. It was very strange. And after that, they dropped me off at my vehicle. When they dropped me off at my vehicle, all the windows in my car were broken, and there was nothing missing out of my car. That's another strange part. I couldn't put that together. I called a police officer because I couldn't figure out who I was, where I was, much less, how I was going to get home. The police officer wasn't much of a help. I asked him if he could escort me home, and he said no. And he gently grabbed a couple pieces of the glass and brushed them off my seat and said, sent me on my way. I only lived 1.5 miles from that bar, and I ended up 45 miles away in the opposite direction, crashed my car into a ravine. I ended up walking to the main road where I hitchhiked. The only reason why I was able to get a ride from the gentleman that gave me the ride was because I was able to convince him that I would go on a date with him that evening, because he asked me what he was going to get out of it if he gave me a ride home. I barely made it home. I slept for 2.5 days, and the CHP had to find my car because I had no recollection of where my car was at.
How long did you work at the biker bar?
1.5 years.
And from there, what happened?
I came back down south, back to my boyfriend and my wonderful life in Laguna Beach, where I surfed every day, and everything was wonderful. And then things started to go kind of awry after about a year. We broke up, and then I found my husband, and I ended up marrying a big cocaine dealer. Before I knew it, I was living in a $4 million house in Laguna Beach and helping him with his papers so he could stay here legally. That didn't work for too long because he was eventually deported. And I ended up having 2 children with his best friend.
Are you still married?
No.
Do you have your kids?
Yes.
Where do you guys stay?
Well, I have custody of my kids, but my kids are with my parents right now in Orange County.
Okay.
Right now I've been staying in LA, kind of couch surfing.
You're on the street?
Yeah.
I assume drugs are part of the story?
Yes, of course.
Fentanyl?
Yes, fentanyl.
When did that start?
I started abusing opiates when I was about 10 years old. My father was a pharmacist. And my dad gave me a half of a Norco when I got in an accident. And I fell in love with that feeling. And I had to figure out what that was. So thankfully, my father had he's a doomsday prepper, and he had an enormous amount of hydrocodone and other pain medication. I ended up the next 15 years of my life abusing pain medication.
So even a 10-year-old with a perfect family gets hooked on opiates.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't need trauma to work, I guess.
No, in fact, I did everything in my power to keep it a secret from my family, and it eventually became obvious.
You still had a lot of school after 10 years old. Were you doing opiates through your...
Well, that's what Adderall is for. So, yeah. I was able to keep my skeletons in my closet long enough to kind of barely scrape by. And from there, I went into I got into becoming a loan officer. I got my NMLS license and started doing mortgage for 16 years. Became an account executive for 2 years, and then we're right back into being a loan officer again, where we also, drugs are very prevalent, and the nightlife and partying.
There's drugs in the loan world as well?
Oh, yeah.
What drugs do you see?
A lot of cocaine. A lot of cocaine.
So you're living on the streets in a tent, or
No, not in a tent.
just crashing where you can?
Where I can, yeah.
Yeah. And how do you support yourself?
I am a thief.
You use the right word for it instead of saying you're boosting. Boosting sounds nice.
Yeah, it's why fluff it up and make it what it's. I mean, it is what it is.
You're honest.
Just be real.
How does being a thief make you feel? Because you're probably not a thief at heart.
No, I'm not. Well, I hope I'm not one at heart. It doesn't make me feel. I mean, pretty awful.
Can you explain how drugs can turn somebody who is not a thief into a thief?
I think when there's something that when you're able to turn to an outlet that is able to numb the pain of facing problems that you never had the answer to. That will almost make you do anything. The difference between me and maybe other drug addicts is I'm not willing to slit my grandmother's throat or steal from my family. I've never really had a hard time making money. I've always found a way to make money without depending on other people or having to sleep with other people.
You talk about pain that you're trying to numb. What do you think that pain is that you're experiencing?
There's a lot of opportunities that I've passed up, and there's a lot of mistakes that I've made. And I think with these mistakes, they're not excusable. I can't apologize for some of the mistakes I've made. So the only way I can selfishly deal with it is by using. You become very self-absorbed, very narcissistic. You know, your family takes a back seat when they really should be a priority.
What is your relationship like with your family now?
Non-existent.
Even though they have your kids?
Mm-hmm. And that's part of that's I would say a majority of what I'm numbing my pain.
It's not easy for a mother to
disappointment and yeah.
Is that your biggest regret?
Oh, it's definitely my biggest regret, for sure.
What emotions do you go through doing this? Living this life?
Well, I have a lot of gratitude for the very fact that I'm alive, and I have my health. I run into a lot of people on the street that are constantly victims, feeling sorry for themselves. So it's not that I don't have any gratitude. I'm very thankful that I am who I am, but I'm just not. I'm disappointed with what I've allowed something to take control of me when I could have taken control of it before my life spun out of control.
What's your biggest fear now?
My biggest fear is not having a relationship with my children. Or losing my family before, it's too late.
Do you think this propensity to get addicted to opiates is something you inherited genetically, or is it trauma-based, or is it where do you think it comes from?
I think it might be a little bit of both. There's trauma, but it's definitely hereditary. I have some family members that they won't admit it, but they've kept it swept under the rug. I have a grandfather who was an alcoholic, but he was a functional alcoholic, very successful man. And then I have some cousins that they won't talk about it. There were rumors that they were using prescription medication.
What does your typical day look like now as an addict?
A typical day is usually waking up to smoking. And then once I pull myself out of that mental fog.
Smoking what?
Fentanyl.
Fentanyl.
Figuring out which stores I'm going to go hit. Essentially rob. And taking the means of transportation necessary to get to those stores. Once I do, I have certain buyers that purchase merchandise in volume, and I cash out. Once I cash out, I reward myself by picking up more fentanyl, and usually run into a group of friends, the same group of friends, over at MacArthur Park, and we end up smoking until park closes, and essentially where I lie my head is kind of, there's never a what's the word? There's no certainty into where I'm going to be in that evening. So, yeah, that's my day.
Do you ever find yourself in a jam where you need your drug and you don't have money to pay for it?
Oh, yeah.
That's got to be the worst situation to be in, right?
No, yeah, it's very uncomfortable. I've found myself in a jam, and I don't call anyone and ask for money. I just suck it up and go sell what I do have, or hustle what I can, to... I know this sounds silly, I don't steal from people. I know stores are people, but I don't... A lot of the people at the park, they steal from each other, and I don't do that. I've never, to be honest with you, I've never gone... There's only been one time where I've been sick in 3.5 years. I've always been able to make enough money to support my habit.
Do you have friends?
I wouldn't say they're friends.
What do you think of living on the streets?
I've met a lot of amazing people that I judged unfairly before. It's not my ideal way of living, and I know that this is not going to last forever. I need to figure out a means to an end. It's not living. There's no structure. There's no, you don't feel like you're part of society. I haven't done laundry in 2.5 years. I throw away my clothes and go steal more clothes. So that's kind of another weird...
What do you think most people don't understand about drug addicts?
No, they all think that, we're all selfish, self-absorbed people why can't you just quit? You can stop it right now, that we're weak. There's a lot more to it. And I think that we need to do a lot more as far as mental health is concerned, to understand it as a disease, and it can affect any anyone from the poor to very wealthy. It doesn't matter any class status. Anyone can be affected by it.
Did you have dreams of doing something else with your life?
Oh, I have tons of dreams of doing something else. I have dreams of getting sober and getting past this chapter. And
How old are you?
I'm 46 years old.
You can still do that.
I think so.
Berlin, what would you say is the most important lesson you've learned in your life?
If it walks like a duck, acts like a duck, it's not a duck. You can't judge a book by its cover. You realize how judgmental people are. My whole life, I didn't understand, I didn't understand racism. I didn't, because I'm obviously Caucasian. I didn't understand. I guess I was one of those judgmental people, and it wasn't until I was at rock bottom that I realized how judgmental people are and how wrong they are. Yeah, I think everyone has a story, and you need to be more conscientious of that.
All right, Berlin, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
I wish you lots of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.